Morning, everyone. Thank you for making it so early today. It's nice to see a full house. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dimitri de Gamaros. I'm the Regional Coverage Manager for British International Investments. That's the acronym, BII. And it's my pleasure today to host this panel and chair it with four very esteemed panelists. Just a quick snippet on what BII is. BII is the UK's development finance institution. So we provide development capital, but it's with a commercial lens. So we have two levers in our investments, both a commercial aspect and a developmental impact aspect. And we really invest across several sectors, all the different types: infrastructure, financial services, real economy, and the entire capital stack. So equity, debt, structured products, and funds. And so enough about me and the institution. I'd love to welcome up Gillian, and I'll give you a brief overview of each panelist as they come up. Gillian is the managing partner at McKinsey & Company, the East African office. She began her career at McKinsey in Canada in 2008, moved to Kenya in 2015. How does it feel to be talked about right beside each other? With a focus on emerging markets, Africa, LATAM, South Asia, Gillian leads the global nature work and agriculture practice in Africa, and her expertise spans economic development, agriculture, nature and conservation, as I mentioned, land use, manufacturing, tourism, and rural development. It's a lot. Most importantly, Gillian is the lead, the Kenyan-Tanzania country lead for FCDO's Manufacturing Africa program that brought us together today. Second, I would like to welcome Sumaya. I'll get going. Sumaya is a data analytics manager at BDO East Africa, who brought us together today, with a passion for turning complex information into clear, actionable insights. She established and scaled BDO's analytics, AI, and automation function, very topical, creating a thriving unit that delivers impact across industries. Her work spans building sector-specific dashboards for manufacturing, hospitality, and services. So I'm sure a lot of you will have questions for her after this. Third off, we have Martin Horn, who's a principal consultant. Welcome, Martin. At Kingdom Business Consulting. Martin is a highly experienced practitioner of world-class manufacturing, WCM, it's the first time I heard that acronym, lean process design, and TPS. He has over 32 years of hands-on experience, holds a master's in industrial engineering, and has helped more than 60 blue-chip clients across 17 industries with capacity, productivity, quality, lead time improvement, and service levels, as well as cost efficiency. So I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of practical aspects from yourself today, Martin. Thank you. And last but not least, we have Martha Osier, partner at Denia Partners. Martha is a partner with over 15 years of experience in private equity and banking across the US and Africa. She's established Denia's East Africa office in Nairobi, where she leads investment sourcing, deal execution, and portfolio management. We're lucky to have her. Her career spans across Citigroup in New York, RFE Investment Partners, General Electric, and Catalyst Principal Partners. And she holds an MBA from Harvard Business School. Let's give a round of applause to Martha. Wonderful. So, thank you again, everybody. And thank you to the Manufacturing Africa team for bringing us together. Given that today's topic of discussion is beyond the bottom line, capturing untapped value to boost industrial margins, the real essence that we'd like to bring out today amongst the panelists and have a bit of an interactive discussion, and then some Q&A, so please hold on to your questions, is really around what can businesses do today to start the journey of improving value in their businesses and boosting their margins. So I guess with that in mind, I wanted to kick off first, and I'll kick off, if you don't mind, Martha, I'll kick off with you. And I'd like to just hear from all the other panelists thereafter. And just what are one or two of the key items that you see, opportunities that businesses that you encounter when you're looking for future investments that are missing in terms of untapping value across generally the manufacturing and industrial space?
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Maybe I'll just give a little bit of background on Adenia for those of you who don't know. So Adenia is a Pan-African private equity fund. Today we are managing just under $1 billion. We invest across a variety of sectors. In Kenya, we've invested in 4 family businesses. The first was Tumaini, which was a retail supermarket with 9 locations when we invested. Secondly, we invested in Quickmart, also a family business, which had 10 stores when we invested. Today, together, they are the leading, Quickmart is the second largest supermarket in the country with 62 locations. We have also invested in Redland Roses, which is a premium exporter of high-end roses. When we invested, the farm was around 28 hectares. Today, we have now expanded the farm to around 43 hectares. And lastly, we've invested in a distributor of laboratory equipment called Africa Biosystems, which is today working very closely with a similar company from Mauritius called Proximed. So just to say that when we invest in businesses, whether it's manufacturing or whether it's distribution, key for us is what is this company's, if you like, je ne sais quoi? What is unique about this company? One, have they reached a stage where they can scale rapidly? So that was the case in Quickmart. They had found a model that we were like, look, there's something special about this. Put this in all of our growing neighborhoods, and you have a very repeatable model. If you look at Redlands Roses, what is unique about this farm? It's very small compared to some of the large farms. But if you look at their revenue per square meter, they are one of the highest in this country and probably in the world in terms of profitability because of the agronomy and the skill that they use to grow their flowers. Secondly, they do not sell through the auction market. So they sell direct to wholesalers, which again means that they are able to control the price that they are looking for. When it comes to manufacturing, we've not made an investment in Kenya yet, but I can give an example of a decorative paints company that we invested in Mauritius in 2014. And in 2020, we sold that company to Asco Nobel, which is the 3rd largest paint manufacturer in the world. So you might be asking yourselves, what did Asco Nobel see in a paint manufacturer in Mauritius, which has a population of barely 1 million? Okay? What we did when we invested in this company, one which again was a family business, was to help them improve their governance structure. So governance is key. And it's not to say you have to be perfect. I think we look at it from today you're at point A, how can we get to point D? So that's important. Secondly, when it comes to manufacturing, especially in our markets, I think distribution is very important. So I would say it's not enough to just, if you're making a widget, to make the widget, or if you're making this water, just an example. Anybody today with AI, all the technology that's available, anybody can make bottled water. What is going to make you stand out is your distribution. So again, if I go back to the paint company in Mauritius, they had over 1,000 stores or distributors in Mauritius. So if you are Asco Nobel, you're thinking, I don't have to build this distribution myself, okay? I have an avenue where I can layer on other products and enter into, call it the Indian Ocean market. So governance is key. In manufacturing, I would say distribution is also important. And then thirdly, do you have some innovation, R&D, something that is, I want to say, unique for our markets? I think what we've seen with a lot of the big manufacturers that used to be here back in the day, Unilever or, name all of those big companies. You notice today all of those products are coming in from Egypt or they're coming in from some other country. So they are not manufacturing per se for our taste. right? They are manufacturing for 400 million people in Egypt, and then the excess demand is coming to us. So for those of you in the room here, you have an opportunity to say, this product is actually made for, okay, let's say East African or Kenyan taste and can transcend. And you now have that je ne sais quoi that somebody in Egypt or Dubai or South Africa is never really going to think about. So those, I would say, would be the key things. And then, of course, I think now you need the basics. You need good accounting. You know, your books should be proper. Again, this is relative, but I think it's important, especially when you're looking at investors, to be transparent and to be honest with what's in the books. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Martha. Martin, if I could call upon you, especially from your practical, very hands-on experience, what one or two? I think Martha gave us 4. It's almost her wish list. So I'll ask for your top 2, criteria that you think would unlock value.
Yes, okay. Thanks for that. What I've been seeing in, let's say, the last 5 years, there are 2 very common themes. Well, actually there are 4, but I'll start with the top 2. That where you could really unlock value quickly by doing manufacturing better. The first one is in the area of capacity. So there's often, companies tell me I haven't got enough capacity, I can't meet the orders, or I'm delivering late. And often there's a market opportunity to sell more, but they feel like they can't produce more. And when I look at the factory, I find, well, you've got at least 20 to 30% capacity that you're just not using. And the reason is that people don't know where their bottlenecks are. Because of the way they set up their manufacturing, the whole plant is drowning in inventory and work in process, and they can't see the wood for the trees. So they don't actually have a production flow. And if I teach them to use a lean manufacturing approach and set up a flow, they start to see where the bottlenecks are. We can measure them quite easily. And then focus on, at least on relieving the bottlenecks. So often wasting a lot of time on changeovers on bottleneck equipment, where changeovers can be done really quickly. There's a whole technology for that. Think of the difference between a tire change on a car if you break down the side of the road versus how they do it on a Grand Prix. The difference between 15 minutes and 2.5 seconds. So we can use those kind of ideas on, especially on bottleneck equipment, to change quickly. We also make sure that that we feed bottlenecks properly. And so it's really quite simple, straightforward, common sense things that can be done. And next thing you know, you've got 20% more capacity available to sell. So for me, that's the shortest route to make more profit, because you've got all your overheads covered. All you're doing is paying for a marginal amount of materials, and you're getting that extra gross margin on 20% more sales. So then the second one I would say is just in terms of cost efficiency in the way you do manufacturing. A lot of companies don't really understand properly the difference between activities that add value and activities that add cost or that just waste. So in looking at designing the process in a lean manner and not having a lot of wasted cost in there, and sometimes it's just a question of sensitizing people to look at their plant with different eyes and to see what is the value that the customer is actually paying me to do. So I'm starting with raw materials that are worth a certain value. Until I convert them to some kind of, I haven't done anything the customer wants to pay me for. That's my value add. So every step that I take where I'm just moving stuff around, I'm sorting stuff, I'm piling stuff up, all of that's adding cost, and it's not moving me closer to the product that I want to sell. So it's the simplest way of kind of looking at what is value add, is what is the customer want to pay me for. And so if we set up a lean process where we're really just doing what the customer wants to pay us for, and we create a flow where we bring materials into the plant, we add value, and ship it out the door. That's essentially what we're trying to do, not to have lots of delays in between. And if we focus on doing that way, in the shortest possible lead time, it also improves service levels. It makes us more flexible, means that we can respond to changes in the market very quickly. We can respond, customers change their mind. So, I try to explain it Again, in simple terms, if it takes me 2 weeks to get an order through the plant, that means I'm juggling 2 weeks worth of orders in the plant all the time. It's very complicated. Things are stopping, things are being put aside, and other things are being rushed through. It becomes chaotic. If I can get that down to, say, a 1-day lead time, then I focus today on what I'm making today, and tomorrow's a new problem. So I can change my mind about what I'm going to make tomorrow if the customer changes their mind, and it has no impact on the efficiency of my plant. So the flexibility that comes from doing things really quickly in short lead time, that's critical to being able to serve customers better and use the extra capacity that I've been talking about. And at the same time, you do it with less cost because you take out all the non-value adding activities that waste material, waste labor, waste space. So yeah, those are probably my top two.
Those are a great top two. I think you're going to be in high demand after the session. And I think that that piece on capacity and really understanding where your bottlenecks are really leads nicely into Sumaya, because from your data-driven experience, what are one or two of the key kind of capacity constraints you see?
So while Martha and Martin spoke a lot about the processes or how they're going to make the decisions, I look at data as a decision enabler, right? Collecting everything that you have from the back end, your manufacturing data, plant material data, machine data, probably collecting, when Martha was talking about what you have in the industry, what's your market specific, a comparison, collecting data out from the market, and then processing it and building in visualizations so that whatever key indicators that you have, whatever are your performance indicators, you bring them out, create metrics out of it that are on top of your mind, which will help you make those decisions that you have to take. While I'm saying data, the visualization helps you analyze what has been done previously. You can also have a layer of AI on it, which is the predictive analytics, where you can see how your plant will work for the next 3 years in terms of manufacturing, or how much labor do you need to fulfill a certain order and make certain decisions, right? And even in terms of investments and all, before a company does go for an investment or is being sold, I think the market due diligence can also be done using data itself. And it brings out a lot of points that are not seen in general discussions too.
And Gillian, if I can ask you the same question based on your experience, particularly consulting and seeing so many different companies, I'd love to hear what your top two are.
Sure. So I was singing a bit from the same song sheet as everyone else. I do think we don't leverage necessarily in this market data and analytics enough for decision making. And I'm not even going to talk about AI. Now we're talking about AI. But even when we talk to banks, which have way more data than most of you have, we still say 60% of the value is coming from traditional analytics. So there is so much to be captured. And I'll just give two very concrete examples that I experienced in this market. I was working with a hardware manufacturing company, right? And this is a little bit to Martha's point. They were facing some threat from low-cost imports from China. And we were trying to figure out what the levers were to improve their business. And we went out and actually did a retail audit. So we just went to about 100 different retail points, hardware retail points in the region, in places they said they had excellent coverage. They were only in 30% of those retail points. They had no idea that this was happening, partly because they're a manufacturer, right? So they were relying on their distributors to take care of everything for them. But then they suddenly realized, wait, we've sort of been relying on these traditional distributors. We haven't incentivized them on retail coverage. We've just incentivized them on certain things. And so you actually found, in comparison, the Chinese company was in 80% of the retail points. So it's really like simple things like this that you need to be doing on a regular basis. This is basic data. You should know what your retail coverage is. You should know what your inventory levels are really on different things, et cetera, right? And I often find that we haven't necessarily put in place some of these systems in our businesses, but there is a lot of value, both top line and bottom line, to be captured there. So that's one. And I could probably give a million more examples if you want, but that's just one. The second thing I think that hasn't been talked about, I think particularly for those of you that are family-owned businesses, which is many of you, a lot of our work shows that the greatest source of value is actually how you're allocating capital and M&A, right? And and when we talk about capital allocation, many of you will have different business lines or different business units. We often see a tendency to keep the dead horse alive, rather than pick the winning horse, right? So are we allocating capital towards the winning horse more and more, right? That actually drives more value than keeping the dead horse alive, or the dying horse, let's say. And then very clever strategic M&A, probably the greatest source of value. Are you looking at stranded assets that are out there? Are you acquiring brands from companies that are exiting? A lot of you have done that, I know, but actually keeping this as a strategic function within your organization that is constantly doing this, probably the most successful manufacturers I've seen in Africa have grown successfully, actually largely through M&A, right? So we can talk more about that, but that's my view.
I think that's actually a really nice thread into M&A and potentially also Martha had mentioned distributors, Martin had mentioned supply chain, and this is all about market diversification. In your view, let's start maybe Gillian. In your view, how do you see that diversification, and are there success? Because as Kenya is having a slightly cooling off period currently, we hear a lot of manufacturers and family-owned businesses looking beyond borders to acquire businesses in, say, Tanzania or Uganda or work with. What do you see as success factors and maybe not?
Oh, great question. So I do think, as I mentioned, diversification is a huge driver of value. So I think a lot of you think about that. That's the right thing to think about. Maybe two lessons from that. One is, if you are diversifying into a business that is not adjacent, it is very far afield. And I had a company I was working with once that was a traditional manufacturer and wanted to acquire a tech-enabled business. It was very foreign to them. Tech, but it was a totally different company profile. It's a great diversification opportunity, different margin, different growth potential. But when you do something like that, you have to realize probably your talent base, your systems are not fit for purpose for that kind of company. And you have to be very careful about not trying to indoctrinate that company into your way of doing things. You have to keep what's special about the companies you acquire, right? But also bring the systems and tools. So there's a bit of a balance. I've seen failure modes where companies do diversify into something very far afield, don't put in the right talent, put in someone very much like themselves into that business, and then destroy the special sauce of that business, right? Martha, you always said, what's the special sauce, right? You can't lose that. So really look at the talent that you are bringing in when you diversify. Do you have the right people who are fit for purpose for these new businesses, not necessarily for the one you have today? So that's one. The second is, I'm going to go back to my point. I do think really smart M&A where you can, especially in other markets. If you are capitalized, we know not everybody has the capital to do it, but really smart M&A. Are you watching, MNCs, we talked about them, they come and go. Sometimes they leave their assets behind. Are you watching that? And are you buying when you need to buy and diversifying that way, right? It's the fastest way for you to build a business, right? But just two lessons.
Thank you. I know Martha maybe has a contrarian point of view here, so I'll call upon you, Martha.
I mean, not that contrarian, but I think it's also worthwhile to look at, can you actually export into those markets? As we've seen now with some of the currency issues we've had in the recent past, the companies that have been quite resilient had a good level of exports. And I know there's a lot of talk about the East African community, but everybody who exports to Uganda, Tanzania, or these other countries, or to Congo, is getting paid in dollars. So for you, it's a good hedge on, let's say, if you're earning here in Kenya shillings. And today, there's a lot of incentives, whether it's the special economic zones, the EPZs, which I think are helping to facilitate this exports into the surrounding markets. So I know it's easier said than done, but the companies that we have seen sort of weather the volatility in the Kenyan market have had a good level of exports, and they continue to grow their exports through distributors. So yes, M&A is an option, but if you could leverage and find good distributors who are willing to come here at their cost, I think there's also a lot of innovation in logistics, some of the cooling companies. So even for ice cream, you're seeing people. I never thought you could export ice cream to Dar es Salaam, but it turns out you can. So I think that's could be an easier route sometimes than M&A. Yeah, but you have to look at both options.
Thank you. That sounds like a very good, almost low-hanging fruit in some ways. And actually related to that, Martin, you had mentioned supply chains and obviously improving efficiency and where the bottlenecks are. In this market, there are also the challenges that are sometimes beyond your control with receiving your raw inputs, etc., maybe at the ports or clearance. And so how do you balance that with achieving operational efficiency and maybe in inventory management?
Yeah, okay. I think basically the right way to set up a supply chain is to look at the customer demand first and work your way all the way backwards to your suppliers. So often people throw their hands in the air and say, oh, I can't reduce my inventories and my holding costs and so on because I've got these import challenges, I've got problems at the ports, all these kind of things that you talk about. But what they're missing is that, first of all, they've got way more finished goods than they need to service the customers they're actually serving. And part of the reason for that is, again, the factory has lead times that are too long. It's not reliable in terms of what it can produce and how the accurate capacity planning, finite capacity planning, so knowing what you can do when, so that you can make order promises and you can deliver more products to order and less from stock. So basically, if you understand the customer's demand pattern, so that's the first thing I would do, is always analyze what is the actual demand pattern of different customers for different products, and then look at how do I set up my factory to service that with more stuff coming straight out of the factory and less coming out of a finished goods store. And often we use 3 different planning techniques in parallel in the same plant. And it sounds complicated, but actually it's not. There's an ability to ship high volume products on a regular basis and have very little stock if you set your plant up to do that. And then you use some inventory on the products that are regular, but not daily or weekly. So you keep a little bit of stock and you replenish that. And then that's a small amount of your inventory. And then the products which are really erratic, you only want to make them to order. You don't want them in stock at all. So you need to keep a part of your production capacity available on a daily basis. Again, using the right, if you have good data, you can work out how much of that capacity you need to hold back every day. Let's say it's 10%, 20%, and you finite schedule, make to order products for small volumes, erratic products that you need to make. So in the end, what you're doing is only the high running products you're not stocking, the erratic products you're not stocking largely, and then the medium running products is where you keep your stock. And you build that, you replenish those products into a store. So now you have finished goods, typically about 40% of the finished goods you had before, but you have 100% service level on every item. So this is a project. When I used to work for a British consultancy, we designed supply chains way back in the 1990s for Microsoft. And using this approach, we were able to cut, but not in stock. All the high volume products were just shipped daily. So, the reason I use this is because you don't understand the products very well. So it would be Windows and Office in English. Those are very high running products with a very flat demand. We just produced them and shipped them to big distributors every day. There was no inventory. And we ended up closing down 8 warehouses all over Europe that were holding this inventory. And we only stocked medium running products that were, say, things like Word on its own in English or Office in French. And those had a regular demand, kind of went up and down. But you could work to an average and you could have capacity available for that. And you could replenish that stock. And then all the erratic products like the Polish educational version of Word that could only be sold to university, that you would only make to an order, maybe 3 orders a year. So by doing that, we could get the service level in that example, from 67% to 97%, using 10% of the inventory that they had before. And that's all just about smart planning and short lead time manufacture. Now, you notice that in this whole answer, I know it's been a long answer, but I thought it was worth explaining it in this way, is that I haven't talked about raw material at all. So even if I did nothing to cut the raw material, with this example I've just explained, I've taken out at least half of my inventory, sometimes even 90%. In finished goods, I've taken all the inventory out the factory. So I can actually afford to invest in safety stock against the ship that slows down or the slow clearing. So in those areas we live with the pain. And we do have to hold safety stock for those kind of things that we can't control in the supply chain. But essentially, there's so much we can do internally in our own plant and in our finished goods and the way we serve customers that we can then only invest inventory where things are out of our control.
I think that's really useful and really helpful to hear. Thank you, Martin. I think related to that, I think we now also have an understanding of where within the system we would be harnessing data. But Sumaya, I think right on the front end, Martin mentioned understanding customer demand patterns. I mean, traditionally that's going out and trying to speak to your customers. What are some of the ways that you would suggest some of the manufacturers in the room go out to get that data, and where does technology feature in that too?
I like classifying data into three parts, right? There is data, there is automation, and then there is AI. And I think it's very important that we all distinguish it in that way, because data is basically what you're collecting on a daily basis, whether it's from your ERP systems, whether it's from your plants, whether it's your accounts, your staff attendance, your staff details, all of that is data that that's lying in your database, right? Gillian did mention banks are utilizing about 60% of their data only. I think the manufacturing industry is utilizing way less than 60%. And they're actually a gold mine for data. So there's a lot that can be done from that. So with the data that's already there, I think we can analyze what's been done in the past. What are the past trends like? Whether it's staff, how many workers do you have? How does your plant work? How many times has it broken down in the last 1 month? How much raw material do you have lying around? So it gives you your current statistics as of now, right? Like what's your revenue as of today? And then when it comes to automation, based on the data that you have, you pick up places where you feel like you can reduce the cost. Suppose you receive an order, and then you have to send it to the plant, but then it goes manually through paper. There is one person who's approving it. So by the time you receive the order and it goes for production, it takes about 3 days because there's no process in place. But then this is something that you can automate, reduces your turnaround time, directly impacting your revenue, right? So automations are those. And then AI is what you can use now to answer your question directly, what you can use to actually collect data from outside, isn't it? There are a lot of conversations that you have with customers on a daily basis, emails. This is one practical example that we've done for ourselves. We analyze the emails that go back and forth between us and the customers, of course, with a lot of data protection, with a lot of controls in place, with a lot of data labels in place, to kind of understand what does the customer feel about us, right? What are the sentiments behind us? Which is the area that's causing them a lot of issues? Yeah, and then you can take actions upon it. The good thing with that is you can also drill down onto why that has happened because of all the other analysis that you're doing, right? And the other way is, again, if you have, we're in such a market where you don't have a lot of data and a lot of businesses out there. So if you take any one of the manufacturing company and try and Google it, you wouldn't find a LinkedIn page. We're actually a data poor country. So it's really difficult to just get something from AI at this stage. But then in case you want to collect on what's out in the market, I think sending out surveys, calling in, I feel like this is a market where we need to have personal interaction with people to kind of understand what's their needs so that we can work on it. So yeah, I think that's how I close it.
Thank you very much, Sumaya. I think that's actually really opened my eyes and it's quite clear, obviously, that we are quite a data poor market. So really the personal interaction really helps bring out the richness of what we could drive value with. I think just in the interest of time, I want to leave enough time for questions. So I'm just going to ask one last closing question to each of the panelists. In terms of what are some of the continuous either training or characteristic-based processes or measures that sponsors or principals can take to continuously strive and be looking out for efficiency. Maybe I'll start, Martha, and then lead back.
I think a really important one was what Gillian had mentioned in terms of, is your product available? I think that's one thing where on the manufacturing side you might miss. So just making sure your product is available either in the formal and informal markets is key, and you need to continuously do these audits, and also to be aware of what else is coming on the market and how are now consumers making those decisions. Yeah.
If I speak to what I would want to put inside the plant, it's about visible, appropriate, timely performance measures. So really, everyone who's working in any job ideally needs to know, was today a good day? And what I see, a lot of plants have no visual measurement at all. So as a team leader running a team on a production line or a section of a plant, I need to know, what am I supposed to be achieving today? Did I achieve it? In terms of output, in terms of quality, in terms of on-time delivery, at least those three things. In some form, I need a measurement which relates to something that I can influence on a daily basis, and I need a long-term trend to see, am I doing better than yesterday, better than last week? And all of this creates motivation, also creates embarrassment where things go wrong. And then the corollary to that is that we really need to train people in scientific problem solving. And this includes managers as well as people on the shop floor. Because a lot of times managers are used to just shooting from the hip when they see a problem, and all they're really doing is putting band-aids over a wound, but they're never asking why it's bleeding in the first place. So we call those containments. What we really want to do is to slow down and do the scientific thinking process where you look for a root cause or a series of root causes that you can then have a hypothesis of what can I do to address the root cause. I can run an experiment and see if my trial works, and then I can roll out that solution, and I can eliminate that waste, that problem, that quality issue, that breakdown, whatever it is. I will eliminate that on a permanent basis, not just a quick fix and it pops up again next week. So I think those are the two big things, measurements and scientific problem solving.
I would say adopt technology. Having said that, I wouldn't say invest heavily in it. There are ways where you can do it without buying all the servers in the world or investing too much in it. You can move to cloud. That's a really quick fix. You can reach out to people who do give technology services because they do own a bigger infrastructure. They could probably host you on their servers, so it becomes easier for you. Adopt data analytics, make sure you're analyzing your data, make sure you're getting your visualizations, and you interact with it on a daily basis. And then, as much as possible, try doing surveys in the market so that you can collect that data too and expand your business possibly.
You asked about a metric, so I will say probably the biggest metric I always look at is, do you know your profitability per the most relevant unit in your business? That is the profitability of an individual product, profitability of an individual acre, whatever it is. If you don't know how your profitability looks for each individual product line that you have, how are you making decisions on what to invest in? You may always have lost leaders, that's fine, but you need to know that. And I will say, in my experience, 70% of the companies in this market do not know their profit by product. And I would just encourage you all to make sure you do that exercise.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think we've left some time for questions, but in the meantime, could we give a round of applause for our panelists, please? So I think we have a floating mic. I'd like to welcome any questions, please.
Good morning, and thank you very much for sharing all these insights. there's been a lot of discussion around using data to make decisions, but I'm curious. I'm curious what sort of steps you take to ensure quality, or at least get to the highest quality that you can when making these decisions.
I think you start small first, in the sense that you utilize whatever data that you have, whether it's clean, unclean. I'm sure at this point, if you don't have data analytics, you're not sure on how your data is lying or how much information is there out there, right? You start with what you have. It kind of gives you a fair idea of how much work you need to do behind it, what all you need to clean up, or what's your position at the moment, right? And then once you have that baseline, it's so much easier to kind of build on top of that to reach a point where you can say now, okay, now I can make decisions. One major drawback that I've seen is that people, as much as they see visualizations, they do not know how to read it. I think when we talk about analytics, it's not only about just the graphs, but it's about how do you read the story? What is it telling you, right? What's the end point? And once you start with a baseline, it kind of gives you the idea on what other story can you make out of it, or what other analysis can you do with your data, and then you kind of build up on it.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for the panelists. My name is Himanshu Dodia. Pretty much agree with Mr. Martin Horn. I'm a Kaizen consultant here based in Kenya. What I would agree with Mr. Horn and of course with Soumya is that before you start collecting all the data and then automate it, the first thing is to get rid of all the non-value adding activities so that you do not institutionalize that data. And then it has a knock-on effect onto your ERP systems, and ultimately it gives you the wrong results, end results. Would you agree with me on that?
Martin?
Yes, well, my first concern with anything that's being automated is always don't automate waste. So I only want to automate if I'm using robotics, which we don't do much in East Africa, but wherever you're doing anything automated, make sure it's a value-adding activity. And the same thing with data steps. I also do quite a lot of work in process redesign, so redesigning purchasing processes, planning processes, even banking and insurance processes. I've done some work there too. And the amazing number of repeated steps where we are putting in a whole load of extra controls that have been there for years, that are not needed anymore. The reason why there was a control and a double check or so on is that root cause is long gone, and yet the process still has that. So we have a culture of just recording stuff, but we don't have a culture of actually turning into usable information. So that's a big gap, I think. But the other thing is where we're just duplicating things. And if we put in any form of automation, especially system information automation, then for goodness sake, let's take out all the paper steps that we used to have, because we often just find that we've duplicated and we've got two parallel systems running.
I think I'll just want to add, I totally agree with what Martin said, but when you go for automation, I think process redesigning is really important. And when you talk about automation, it's just not lifting whatever you already have and then replicating it, but it's looking for the most efficient way you can do it, which possibly would mean maybe skipping 2 steps, taking a different route, probably having a just completely new process flow. So I think as you embark on your digital journey, these are, like you said, these are the certain steps that you need to take to be able to make decisions with data and have automation and AI in place.
Fantastic. I think we have time for just one more question.
Good morning. My name is Alinda Capwell, and I work for Kentegra Biotech, a leading processor in the pesticide formulation. I have a couple of questions, 3 to be precise. And the first one will go to Martha. You mentioned that a lot of your portfolio actually encompasses family-owned businesses. Was that intentional? And secondly, what have you seen in those family businesses, led businesses, that is not necessarily in the other companies? The second one will be to Martin Horn. Thank you so much. We really valued your contribution when you came to work with us at Kentegra. So my question is, having done a lot of the work that you had advised, at what point do we realize, actually, this is the next step, and how do we then pivot from the previous work of that had been done? And then the third one is to, I think, the entire panel. So we have talked about data processes, but I feel there's a missing link, and that is people and culture. Behind those machines and processes are human beings. So how do we ensure we have a good culture that can actually enable us to tap into the value that the business is actually intended to, achieve? So please, thanks.
That's a fantastic. Next time you need to be in my position. Arthur.
To answer your first question, no, it was not intentional that all of these were family businesses. I think it was more just a situation that arose. Usually, as you know, in this country, most companies, most SMEs are run by families. So it was not intentional. I would say those are the opportunities that were available at the time. But maybe the common thread that we see across family businesses is usually one, capital to scale. Yeah. So most companies, I'm sure here, you're able to grow through bank financing. But we know that bank financing in this country is tied to hard asset collateral. So at some point, you as a family decide you're no longer going to work for the bank, right? Or you don't have collateral to get more access to that capital. So I think one, it's what other options of capital are available to family businesses. Two, could also be resources and the skill. So if I think back to the founder of QuickMart, he told us he used to walk around with 10 keys for the 10 shops, yeah? But today, he can't walk around with 60 keys. So at some point, if you want to scale to a certain level, you realize that you have to professionalize your team, professionalize your management beyond the family, right? Because you might not have enough children or enough, to run the business. So I think those are the scenarios that presented themselves. And then the third one is succession. Yeah, we find a lot of entrepreneurs who started their business when they were already well into their 40s, okay? So it's not necessarily a business that the children have grown up with thinking, one day I'm going to be in mommy's shoes, one day I'm going to be in daddy's shoes. By that time, the children are already, thriving in their other careers. So that's a reason why someone or a lot of families will come to people like us to say, okay, I've built something unique. This is my legacy. How can we keep it going? You bring in a professional team. You establish good governance. And yes, your legacy is able to continue without, with or without the family members being there. Maybe I'll let the other members answer.
Okay. Yes, well, thanks for your kind words about my short visit to Contegra. I remember that some of the key things that we focused on there were some layout changes to remove some non-value-adding steps in the processes, and also unlocking capacity in some of the key, most constrained equipment using much faster setup techniques. So if those things are largely done, I think the next big opportunity really is to roll out a culture of Kaizen, of continuous improvement. And that's going to take training really of that thought process and that method from the management down. And you over time, you gradually want to roll that thinking process down into the shop floor, at least to the team leader level, and even to the operators. And to do that, you need to have some visual measurements at each part of the process that those people can influence, as I was explaining earlier. So I think that those are the important things. They need measurements that show them where they're succeeding and where they're not, and then they need the scientific thinking process of Kaizen to make improvements on an incremental basis, and that to make that a culture. It's having a winning culture in the business.
I think just to close out, we'll let Gillian just comment on that last piece around people and culture, and maybe something related to also how you see the HR processes feeding into that.
Yeah, and this is an excellent point, right? We haven't talked about it, but you're absolutely right. In the end, it's people that make or break a business, right? I think what Martin mentioned on the culture of Kaizen is very important. Maybe I'll just give one tactical suggestion. Continuous improvement means you have to be open to your employees suggesting improvements, right? And flagging issues and many, I'm not going to call out anybody, but many organizations have a culture of fear, and there's a feeling that people at the sort of shop floor cannot bring up those issues. If that's the culture you have, you will never really improve, right? And I think the whole philosophy of Kaizen, et cetera, is to bring that up. I have a friend who runs an agribusiness here, and she very much, for example, asked for a simple practice where in any meeting, everyone had to share one idea, right? No matter who she was meeting with. It could be the ladies at the market, it could be the people in the farm, et cetera. Everyone had to raise an idea because she realized there was this fear of raising ideas. So it's just an idea, but really make sure that fear is not there, that it starts from the top, that you're encouraging people to bring up ideas, and you have a filtering process for them. Right?
Fantastic. Just a final thank you to our panelists and a quick round of applause. Thank you.